So David Veksler is going to speak today on radical strategies for achieving financial success. David is a multi-talented guy who is currently the Director of Marketing at the Foundation for Economic Education. He has worked as an information systems architect for companies including Match.com, Education First, and Liberty Me. His interests include Krav Maga, biking, photography, gadgets, and giving talks on Bitcoin, personal finance, and cybersecurity. David has also been extremely helpful with TOS over the past couple of years. We had a website that was in absolute disrepair for a while. I don't know that the customers recognized that, but on the back end for our personal internal use, it was pretty rough. And David came on a couple years ago with his expertise and a little bit of time that he has outside of having children and doing all of the other things that he's doing, and really helped us out. So I want to give him a warm welcome with that in mind as well. Thank you, David.
Thanks, Greg. So, I'm a radical for capitalism. I believe that a free market society would make everybody dramatically better off. And I think it's easy for us to support a free market society because most of us will not have to pledge our life, liberty, and sacred honor and actively fight for freedom. We have to advocate for it intellectually, but for us as individuals, there's not a clear measure of how effectively we're pursuing this goal. But I believe that reason can be applied to all areas of life. And if you apply reason to your relationships, you should see an improvement in your relationships. And if you apply it to your health, you should lead a healthier life. But it's kind of difficult to measure the impact of rationality, or it's difficult to give a single number about how rational you are about your health. There's not a number that you can point to. There's not a number that you can point to say how rational you are about your relationships, how effectively you're accomplishing that goal. But there is a number when it comes to personal finance that you can point to, and it gives an idea of how effectively you are applying rationality to your personal finance. There's actually a series of numbers that I will share with you. And if you believe that by using reason in all aspects of your life, and in all aspects of society and morality, you can dramatically improve these things, you ought to believe that by being consistent and rational and principled about your personal finance, you can improve this area of life as well. And that's what I want to talk about today, my experiment over the last 2.5 years in being consistent and trying to be principled about personal finance and what I've accomplished. So I don't manage other people's money, so I've talked about my own example. I came back from 5 years in China about 2.5 years ago, and my spending habits were not dramatically different from most Americans. And I decided to make an experiment and try to do some research, try to be more consistent about personal finance, and see what I could accomplish. So what I did was between 35 and just after my 37th birthday, I saved $1 million on a middle-class income. Now, $1 million is not a lot of money. A few weeks ago, Mark Zuckerberg made some announcement, and he lost, $17 billion in 1 hour. So lots of people have made much more money than I have. That's not extraordinary. My point is not that I saved a nice amount of money. My point is that I did this on a middle-class income by not doing anything really special. I didn't start a company. I didn't, win the lottery. I didn't make any huge windfall. I made a lot of small changes in my lifestyle, and it snowballed. And it allowed me to achieve some things that I didn't think were possible, or not possible as soon as I expected them. So my point is not that this is extraordinary. My point is that most of us are not going to start billion-dollar.com companies. Most of us are going to have a middle-class income, and you can actually be a lot more successful than the average American if you're principled with your personal finance. And so I have a lot of specific ideas about how to accomplish that in areas of your life. This is me in Thailand. My goal is to achieve financial independence a lot earlier than possible, and to live a life of freedom where I can pursue the things I want to and not be forced, or not be forced, the wrong word, not to need to work a wage job to achieve what I want in life. So my goal is not to retire dramatically early, but to have the freedom to live my life and to earn money when I want to, not because I have to. So there's 3 stages that I focus on because financial independence and freedom mean different things to different people. So the first goal that I think everybody should aim for and everybody can accomplish is financial security, which is to have 3 months of emergency savings saved up. And by doing this, which the vast majority of Americans don't have 3 months of savings saved up, you can dramatically lower the financial stress in your life. So it means that any unexpected health expenses, or most health expenses, most auto expenses, losing your job, having family crisis, is not nearly as big of a deal because you can cover that out of your savings easily. The second goal is a lot higher threshold, is financial independence, which means that you don't have to work to achieve your current standard of living. And that's about 25 times your yearly spending. That allows you to have a 4% withdrawal rate, which, based on some stock market history, means that you can live off the return on your savings without having to draw down the amount you have saved. And then the ideal amount is financial freedom, which is 25 times your ideal lifestyle. So obviously everybody has different goals, and realistically most people don't want to have a private jet. Most people want to fly maybe first class and order the steak and not the meatloaf. And so that's financial freedom, not your current lifestyle, but your desired lifestyle. So there's 3 parts to this, and you really have to master all 3 to be successful. For a very small amount of people, simply earning a lot of money is enough to be set for life. But for most of us, we have to earn the money, we have to keep most of it in our bank, and we have to generate a positive return on what we have saved. So we have to master maximizing our income, minimizing our spending or our burn rate, and we have to maximize the returns on our investments. And I will cover these 3 areas in turn in my presentation. So first, let's talk about how to optimize your career, how to make the most from your work. So I'll ask a few questions just to keep this interesting, since we're doing this right after lunch. What's the best way to increase your salary? And you can shout out answers if you like. Ask for a raise. Yeah. Okay. The best way to increase your salary is to quit your job early and often. Why is that? It's simple math. There's a ton of research behind this. There's a chart missing, but okay. So the idea is that when you get a raise, you'll get a raise of 2 to 5%. Rarely you'll get a raise of 30%. But if you quit your job, the average person can get a raise of about 30%. And so there's a ton of research on this. If you simply change work every a few years, you can raise your income level much faster than if you wait for your boss to give you a raise. Okay, number 2, make your job your primary focus in life when you're young. So what does that mean? Well, on a kind of basic level, it means that you show up to work every day and you're not tired because you were up late and you were partying or drinking. That's kind of basic, to care about your work. But more fundamentally, it means that you focus on your work as the main focus, the main passion you have when you're young. It means that you're aggressively taking ownership of whatever you're working on. So there's a book called Extreme Ownership, and I didn't even read the book. I just saw the title, and I thought that's exactly what you should do. Whatever you're working on, whatever your work is, you should take extreme ownership. You should take that product or whatever the line of product or assembly line that you're working on, and take personal stake in the success of that product, and that will show. This used to be an ideal back when people actually took work seriously 100 years ago. Dale Carnegie said that, "Are you bored with life? Find a work that you love, and live for it, die for it, and you will find a happiness that you never thought could be yours." And so this used to be the ideal, that young people should live their life around their job. And now I see people that live their life around Netflix and partying and girls and all these distractions, and are not aggressively investing in their own value. So you need to take ownership of your current job. You need to take ownership of your skills. You need to aggressively develop your value to your employer and to potential employers, and make your work your primary focus in life, especially when you're young. So as part of that, you have to continually seek opportunities to upgrade your value and your career. So you need to think about, what skills do I need to learn? Some people assume that your boss is responsible for training you. But ultimately, you're the only one that actually cares about what value you have on the market. And keep that in mind. You are responsible for training yourself. You need to research what skills are valuable on the market, what opportunities are up there. Keep your LinkedIn profile updated. Keep networking. Actively post on LinkedIn. Actively network. No matter how good your job is, there's opportunity out there, and you have to be ready to take advantage of it. You have to be the one that's responsible for making yourself valuable. I think the school system teaches us that we passively accept whatever major we've chosen, we will have value on the market. But no, you are responsible for, on a lifetime basis, discovering what it is that the market is will value, and making yourself somebody that's capable of creating that value. So a story. I have a hobby of photography. I was living in China and just traveling around China just for fun, taking photos. And I thought about, how can I take this hobby and use it to further my career. My career was as a software developer. So I was invited to China to work for a Western company, to work as a software developer, and I just couldn't get a raise. I couldn't move up. And so I had this hobby of photography. And I heard about this new project in my company to build a photo sharing platform. So we had millions of customers, not millions, hundreds of thousands of customers in several countries. And there's this project that I just heard about to build a photo sharing platform. And I thought, hey, I love photography. I really know this domain really well. And so I pitched myself. And I said, I know photography. I know all the requirements. I know how to manage photos, how to optimize the files. Let me build this platform. And so that's how I got promoted from being a software developer to being a software architect, from writing the code by hand to leading a team. And so I found a way to combine my passions and my day job to level up. And I've been doing that ever since, finding something I enjoy doing and using that to further my career. So now my title is Director of Marketing. A few years ago, I was a software architect, as I told you, but I liked to promote businesses on the web, and I like to write, and I liked art, and I said, what if I shift to marketing? Digital marketing requires a lot of technical ability, and it requires ability to sell a product, and to be a writer, and to be a speaker. And so I shifted my role, and I became Director of Marketing at FB, as what I do now. And so, if you can use your passions to drive your career. And so Getty Images now lists on my photos, and I've made a few sales. I'm probably, not ever going to be a full-time photographer, but I know, I always have options because I aggressively develop my hobbies, and the things I do for fun, I take as seriously as I do my work in terms of developing my value, developing skills. When I wanted to get into photography, I took a master class by a National Geographic photographer, and I learned all the basics, and then I applied that skill. So next tip, demonstrate your value to your employer. So my whole marketing team is here. We have Ezra and Lisa over here. And so we post on our Slack. Slack is a messaging platform at our office for sharing, it's like email, but better. So we post what we do on our Slack channel. And I think it's important that you consider marketing yourself a key part of your job description. Because in many kinds of jobs, your boss or your coworkers don't really know what you're doing. They don't really see the value you're creating. Maybe on an assembly line, per minute you're passing, but on many jobs, it's not clear. And so remember that marketing yourself, showing your value, is a part of your job description. And so in our Slack channel, we post what we accomplish, right? So we'll ask my team to create reports and share them so that it's visible, the value we're creating. But in marketing, it's not always clear, how much sales you're actually driving. So marketing yourself is part of your job description. And next one, and this is the big one that was successful for me, to create multiple income streams. So your day job is an income stream. And I think every young professional needs to have 4 income streams that they develop. So 1 is your day job. 2 is when your savings, you need to invest them. So you invest your savings in the stock market, and that's a return from your investment portfolio. That one is easy to explain. 3 is your side gigs. So as I said, I've always had different hobbies, and I try to turn it into revenue stream. So right now I have maybe 5 different projects that are either generating income or have the potential to be successful businesses. And they're things I never imagined I could have. So I'm a managing partner in a hedge fund. Like I was 5 years ago, I was a software developer. What do I know about hedge funds? But one thing led to another. I got into Bitcoin. I got offered to be a partner in a hedge fund, and now we're operating a successful hedge fund. I have a small business doing consulting for Bitcoin users that want to know how to keep their coins safe and so on. And if you develop your hobbies, you can often turn them into additional sources of income. And then the 4th type of income stream is asset-derived income. So this could be real estate. These are assets you hold that generate money for you. So if you lease out a home that you purchase, that's asset-derived income. If you buy a stake in a business or build a business, that's asset-derived income. And so you need to develop all 4 to maximize your income potential. There's a quote that the average millionaire has 5 sources of income. So yeah. This is also Slack, and you can see I have Slack as a messaging tool again, and I have a project for each side gig that I have. And I just flip between them. Yeah, my team over there wrote that. So, for each side gig I have a project, and then I manage the channel. And so, yeah, each one of these represents an income stream that I've developed. Okay, so that's maximizing your income. Now, that's important, but no matter how much you make, there are people that have a very high income but are very poor because it all goes out the door. And there's tons of millionaires and NFL athletes who made $100 million and are broke because their spending is higher than their income, and now they're in debt. So you have to optimize your savings rate as well. So a lot of people start with ideas such as make my own coffee or bring my lunch to work. And I have written about why you should bring your lunch to work, and I do that. I'm not on a liquid diet where I have a protein shake instead of lunch, and saves a lot of time, saves money. But actually, that's not where I would start at all. So if you actually look at how the typical family spends their money, you don't have to read this. You'll see that there's 3 so-called fixed expenses that account for over 60% of a typical household's spending. And there's a more detailed breakdown, and basically what you see is that the top 3 expenses are housing, transportation, and insurance. And most people take these fixed expenses, so-called fixed expenses, as fixed, meaning you can't change them. But actually, why not start with the 3 biggest expenses and not trivial expenses such as making your lunch and bringing it to work? Now, making your lunch every day is a lot of work. It's a major habit. It takes time to make it. It's difficult, or skipping coffee. I mean, who wants to skip coffee? I mean, I don't care, Starbucks versus office coffee tastes the same to me. But for some people, it's a big deal. It's a big sacrifice, and you have to do it on an everyday basis. But a fixed expense, it's a set and forget thing. So if you move to a cheaper apartment, you make a decision once, and then it's automatic. Fixed expenses are actually easier to do. Fixed savings are easier than ongoing savings, because you just do it once and then it's done. And for the three biggest expenses, that's actually easy to do. So I'm going to go through these in turn. So first we have housing as the number one expense. And my number one tip is, for young professionals, don't buy a house. Why not? So there's all these calculators online that go through the pros and cons of buying a home. One thing you'll learn is that it's actually not nearly as advantageous to buy a house as is commonly assumed, because it's actually expensive to keep a home. You have to pay all these insurance and repair costs, and it's time consuming. And actually it turns out that it depends where you live, obviously, but in many places you have to live like 10 or 20 years before there's a break even and it becomes cheaper. But that's not actually my point. If you look at house prices, it's a gamble. It's an active market, and depending on where you live, depending on when you buy in, you may make a profit or you may not. It's a hugely leveraged expense where you pay a small amount of money down to gamble on the future. Actually, the stock market is far safer as an investment. But actually, the reason that I'm opposed to home buying is that when you're young and you're focusing on your career, you need to focus on your work. And having a home is a huge distraction from your work. For example, my dishwasher flooded a few months ago in my apartment, and my whole apartment was coated with 3 inches of water. Within 1 hour, I had 3 guys in there with air blowing machines. They dried it out. They replaced the dishwasher. Cost me nothing. Within 1 hour, I was back at the office. They had all been taken care of. Now imagine this was a home. I would have had to get all these contractors, would have had all this ruined furniture, would have had to buy new appliances, huge expense, huge headache. I would have missed, several days of work just to handle all this. So by not having a home, I saved this huge distraction, and actually financially I'm better off. Again, it depends on where you live. Where I live, Midtown Atlanta, I pay $1,500 for my apartment. I would have to pay $3,000 for an equivalent home in the same neighborhood. Because I live in an apartment, whenever I change jobs, I change apartments, so I can bike to the office. I'll talk about that in a second. I've written about why you should get a bike. This is my bike. I have these tutorials on how to exactly configure your bicycle. So not everybody can do this, obviously. But because I live in an apartment, I change my apartments every time I change jobs. I bike 5 minutes to work. It's all uphill, so it's 10 minutes to work, 3 minutes home. So I'm able to make this, to optimize my cost of living because I don't have a house. And the average car costs about $8,600 per year. When you take in all expenses of owning the car, maintenance, gas. Now I have 2 cars. I'm trying to sell the other one, but for many years I didn't have a car because I biked to the office, because I didn't have a house, because I was so flexible, save a huge amount of money, and I hate commutes. Right? The biggest cost of car ownership, in my opinion, is the commute, because you're not being productive. You're losing all that time. I don't have a commute. I have a 3-minute bike ride home, and I'm home with my family, and I'm able to spend the time with my family or being productive, making extra income, and being able to get home in an instant gives me huge flexibility. My wife calls, says, dinner's ready, and I say, I'll be there in 3 minutes, right? And so that means I can stay longer or just have extra flexibility. And so that makes me more productive, and that's the real value. So I not only save in a car, I can work much more during the year and not waste it on a commute. So then the third biggest expense is insurance. So many people assume that you should buy all this insurance to prepare for emergencies. And I'm opposed to insurance. Now, some insurance you have to have, like health insurance is not only mandatory, but it's actually not insurance at all. It's like a prepaid spending plan. But insurance is necessary when you cannot cover expenses out of your savings. Once you build up savings, the need for insurance drops out. So I don't need life insurance because I can have $1 million in cash. Why would I buy insurance when my family is already covered for? And the more responsibilities you get as you go get a family, the more income, the more savings you should accumulate to be able to pay for any unexpected auto expenses, home expenses, renters, insurance. So I try not to have any insurance other than what is legally necessary, because now I can cover it out of my savings. Yeah, so here's just a Facebook status where I summarize some of my ideas. Rent a small apartment, save $10,000, give up my car, ride a bike to work, I self-insure to the legally allowed maximum, keep the alcohol down so I don't make dumb decisions, and then I work out, and so I have to see a doctor once a year for a checkup, so I have low health expenses. And so that's the basic idea for minimizing your savings. Minimizing your spending, sorry. Okay, next idea, the abundance mindset. So I thought abundance is this hippie term, but really I've bought into it a lot more recently. And I've realized that many people see the world as really being scarce, as the physical world as being scarce. That you have to hoard possessions and you have to hoard things in your home because opportunity, enjoyment is scarce. Whereas the only thing that's really scarce is space in your home and your time on earth. Those two things are the most valuable things you have, and they really are scarce. But the opportunity, the enjoyment, entertainment in the world is out there. It's not in your home. And I see so many people, this is difficult to explain, but I see so many people that try to stuff all their hobbies into their house, that hold on to things as if the pleasure in life comes from taking your hobbies, taking whatever you love and putting it in your home. I go explore, enjoy things in the world. So again, this is kind of complicated, but my article, my daughter, we were at IKEA. She was playing with a kitchen playset. And I told my wife, hey, we should buy a kitchen playset, and so she can do this at home. And my wife said, we don't need one because my daughter, who was 3 at the time, she has her own sharp knife. She cuts vegetables and she helps to cook in the kitchen. And she has the real world to play with. She is actually learning how to cook with real food, real utensils, child-sized, but she doesn't need an imitation set. And I thought that as an adult, I should also apply this philosophy. I don't need poor imitations of the world. I need to go out and explore and experience the things out there, not have a poor imitation in my home. So I'll talk more about this later. So related to this is minimalism. So I only acquire things that keep adding value to my life. Because everything that I own has a cost to acquire it. It has a cost to keep it in my home. It has a cost to take it with me for the rest of my life. That's how I think about it. If I buy this thing, I have to drag it with me. Not only pay the cost to buy it, but to ship it, for forever. And mentally, I have to keep track of all these things. And I want to minimize the number of things that I need to keep and acquire and have with me. And this allows me to have a small apartment and to take chances and to travel. Right? This is what I want to do. I want to explore the real world. I don't want to stuff it all in my home. So when I got an opportunity, I was living in Manhattan, and I got an offer to move to China. And it's super expensive to ship your household to China. It was not covered by my company. We could only take 2 suitcases per person. So we packed our things into 4 suitcases, moved to China for 5 years. And then I got another opportunity to move back to the US. We took, now we had 6 suitcases because we had a daughter. And then we moved everything back with us. And we could do that because we only acquire and keep the things that keep adding value to our lives. We don't buy things because we expect the things to entertain us or to bring us pleasure just by having them. We have things that actively add value. We don't keep things out of sentimental reasons. The world is what we go and explore or enjoy. It's not the things in our house. So there's a book by Marie Kondo about how to do things that keep value to your life. And this is, getting philosophical and maybe not on finance, but really it's what allows me to be flexible, to take opportunities, to live in an apartment and not feel strained for space at all. And it really is responsible for keeping a high savings rate for me. Okay, so let's move on to dumb financial mistakes. So the top financial mistake people make, can you guess what it is? Yes, debt is the number 1 mistake. And there's all kinds of ways that people get into debt. So let's go over quickly some reasons that people are in so much debt. Most millennials have a negative savings rate. They're in debt, and they're spending more money than they're saving, which is terrible. How are you ever going to retire if you have a negative savings rate? So the top reasons that you are in debt: you're paying high rates of interest, obviously. You're choosing your home or car purchase based on your credit score. What does that mean? It means you go to a realtor and you say, I want to buy a home. And they say, let me check your credit. Okay, your credit lets you buy a house that's worth $500,000. And so you say, okay, I'll buy a house worth $500,000. Now, what does that mean? It means that they're assuming that if you spend your entire surplus savings every month, this is the biggest home you can afford. And as a result, after you buy that house, your entire surplus savings goes to the house. You can now no longer afford anything else. So this is buying your home or car based on your credit score. When you buy the most you can afford, you need to buy the least that you can tolerate, right? The smallest home that you're comfortable living in. And then you maximize the money you have available on everything else. This is why you see somebody living in a mansion, driving an ancient car, having broken down furniture, because they bought the biggest house they can afford. Now they have no money for anything else. Buy the least you can tolerate. Not be miserable, but be happy. But don't buy something just because the bank says that if you put all your savings in that, you can afford it. This third point is maybe a little tricky: commuting to work and paying millions for your dog. What does that mean? This is regional, but in some places people really want to have a backyard, and so they will buy $1 million house and take a 2-hour commute just so they can have a backyard for their dog. And so they pay for huge mortgage. They spend large years of their life driving stuck in traffic, and it adds up to millions over a lifetime, just so they can have a backyard. Now, I live in Midtown Atlanta. Homes next to where I live go for over $1 million, but I have a small apartment, but I have a park next to me. Now, I don't have a dog, but if I wanted a dog, I would just walk the dog to the park. I would not buy either $1 million house or a home out in the burbs just so I can have a backyard, right? So you have to be rational about this. You should not don't have this floating ideal that I want to have a home with a backyard when there's a perfectly good, a better alternative. There's a park with a dog yard, and if I don't have a dog, but if I had one, it would have all these other dogs to play with, and I can go with my kids to the park, and there's a playground. There's an awesome playground next to my home, but it's usually empty because all the kids are inside with all the play sets that their parents stuff inside their home, because they want their home to be the spaceship recreating all of reality, when the real world is so much better. My daughter gets all her exercise in, she runs, she plays on the playground. We don't have to stuff it all in our house. Investing in depreciating assets, number 4. It means that an asset is something that generates income, right? Everything else is a liability. The house you live in is a liability. It costs you money, doesn't make you any money. It depreciates. Your car depreciates. Anything that doesn't depreciate, doesn't make you money, is a liability that's causing you to spend money. And people buy things that they think is an asset, but when in reality it's just costing them money. They buy a big home, they think they bought something of value, but really, it is a value, but it doesn't generate any money. It just sinks money. Paying your mortgage, you should avoid that if possible. If you buy a duplex, live in half of it you rent out. I would prefer to always rent an apartment, and if I buy homes, they will be income-generating assets because I will rent them out. A last mistake: deferring your savings. So I'll go into detail in a minute, but the earlier you start saving, the more time you have for your assets to accumulate. And so because people don't save when they're early, they have to always, for the rest of their life, go into debt whenever they want to make a larger expense, and that's how you get into debt. But finally, as a disclaimer, know when to throw your money at problems. So know the value of your time. So there's a lot of things that I know how to fix. I used to be an engineer. I know how to fix a lot of stuff around the house, but I pay professionals to do it because my time is valuable. And so I fix things when I enjoy fixing them. I pay a professional when it saves time and it's not going to be a pleasure for me. Lastly, keep track of your spending. So you have to know where you are to get better. And so there's a great tool. By the way, people that plan their personal finance have an average of $1 million by 50. People that don't plan have an average net worth of 338,000. So this is based by a lot of research. So by tracking this is my tool called Personal Finance, and you can sign up for it for free, link all your bank accounts, all your credit cards, and it'll tell you how much you're spending every month, right? And it'll tell you your cash flow status. And by being aware of this, you can be much smarter about your financial decisions. Okay, so we've talked about how to maximize your income and how to minimize your burn rate, how to have the highest rate of savings. And once you have savings, you have to invest it. You have to maximize the return on your investments. And this part is the shortest, because really it's not that difficult, as I will explain. So what kind of salary do you need to have 1 million by 40? So, I did this in just a few years by just after my 37th birthday. But most people, maybe are middle class, have a little lower income, but can still have $1 million in bank by 40. And it's simple math. The middle class average income, the average household income, can earn 1 million by 40. It's simple math of compound growth. If you take 20 years, let's say between 20 and 40, and you put $1,300 down per month, before inflation, you will have $1 million after 20 years, right? So 20 years, $1,300 per month, $1 million after 20 years. If you can put more down, you will have more. There's some math to back it up, but it's simple math. Growth compounds every month, and the earlier you start, the more you will have after a decade or two. So what's the number one factor in investment success? Can anybody give me a guess?
Diversification.
Yeah, so all of these... So all good answers that I will actually cover, but actually the savings rate is the number one factor in investment success. So Schwab did some research, and they looked at diversification, what you buy, your market timing, but actually the most important factor is how much of your income you're able to save. Because the return can fluctuate, but if you can save twice as much, you will earn a lot more than being smarter about what you buy. So this idea of buying low, sell high is actually not possible. The best way is to go long. And Warren Buffett has written a ton about this. He doesn't know anybody that could consistently time the market. His suggestion is pick good stocks and just keep them forever. So the most important thing is your savings rate. And I try to save 50 to 60% of my income from my day job and put that all in the stock market. And that's really the trick. Minimize your burn rate, save the majority of your day job, and then use your side gigs to pay for your daily expenses. So diversification is important because you cannot pick what will be successful. So this is a grid of all the different types of investments you can make and the return for each. And the point is that this is showing the return of different types of investments. You cannot predict this. You cannot guess it's going to be small cap, large cap, domestic, international. Cannot predict it. It's all, the future is unknown. The safest bet is to diversify and to have a balanced portfolio. So this is a complex idea, but this is a modern portfolio theory is the idea that there's high risk and low risk investments. And if you put all your eggs in one basket, you're getting high reward but high volatility. And if you pick a really safe investment, you're getting lower return and lower volatility. But if you diversify, you can be on the efficient frontier. You can be relatively safe and still maximize your returns. So this is what you want. You want to diversify, not put all your eggs in one basket, so you get the most return for a given level of risk. And then just pick how much risk you actually want. This is my portfolio. So I have some mostly US stocks, I have some international stocks, I have some gold, some alternatives, some real estate, but I diversify and I optimize it so I have the most return for the risk I'm willing to tolerate. And then the next part is just minimize the costs, right? So the idea here is that people, investment advisors, mutual funds, that try to pick winning stocks, underperform people that just buy the whole market. That if you buy the index based on a ton of research, you will tend to do almost as good as professional stock pickers. And after their fees, you're buying the stock picker a Porsche, and after the fees, they actually underperform simply investing in the market index. So, the idea is that markets are weak form efficient. Everybody's acting the same public information. And unless you have access, like Warren Buffett, to visit the company and have some insider information, you're not going to outperform market average sufficiently to justify the extra effort involved. And so what you do is you buy an index fund, and you keep it forever. And it takes very little work. You can buy one fund, which is the whole market Vanguard fund, pay 0.15% fees per year for that. And it requires zero thinking or effort after that. Keep it for your whole life. So specific suggestions, buy low-cost ETF index funds. You can use a robo-advisor. I use Personal Capital. If you go with them, you can tell them I referred you. There's a few other options. And chaperone for low fees. There's many advisors at Chase, et cetera, that charge 5% fees for management every year. They're going to eat your returns. You want to have under 1% fees. That's the whole trick to being successful in investing. Low fees, diversify, keep it forever. Some specific ideas to close out about your 401k. You'll get a long list from your company. I always max out my 401k at the beginning of the year, put 100% of my income into it, so I can get into the market early. And then I pick the lowest fees index funds. So I just look at the list of fees, I pick the lowest management fee, and the index fund. And that's how I maximize the return. So, 3 principles. Maximize your income, focus on your career, lower your spending rate by practicing minimalism, only buying things that keep adding value to your life, and keep your investment costs low, diversify, and you can have $1 million before long if you're consistent. The whole idea is that you achieve your financial goals, live a life without having to go to work every day. I'm not against work, but I'm for the idea that you should have the freedom to choose what kind of lifestyle you want to live and what kind of work you want to do. Thank you. That's it. So, questions?
Thanks for your presentation.
Thanks.
Can you think of any time in history when strategies such as passive investing and diversification were bad ideas?
Well, mathematically, sure. There are strategies where, in hindsight, it would have been better to time the market. But looking forward, there's no way to predict when such a period might happen. So you might say that the U.S. economy is in a huge amount of debt, and there's going to be a correction, a major correction. The dollar will collapse, but maybe that'll happen next year. Maybe it'll happen 5 years, 10 years. So you can have macroeconomic insights into the economy, but it's impossible to time. And there's a ton of research showing that if you simply stay in the market, you're going to do better. So you can only do that looking back, not forward.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for the talk. I wanted you to expand a little bit more on the like forms of transportation and everything, like in terms of cutting, I guess, car costs and like perhaps other alternatives, because I mean you mentioned bike, which is a good one, but it's not always available.
Right.
So like yeah, so like lease, like would you recommend like leasing, buying a car is better?
Well, here's what I would say. You have to consider the full cost of car ownership. So research shows the average car in the US costs $8,600 per year. If you live in New York City, it'll cost a lot more than that. If you take Uber whenever you need a car, are you going to spend more than $9,000 per year? I don't know. So you consider the full cost of ownership, but also if you're taking Uber, you can do something else while you're riding in it. And so consider the value of your time. And also consider if you live in an apartment closer to work, so you can ride a bike, you may have to pay twice as much in rent, but you save a lot of time and you don't have to have a car. So just consider the full cost of making, don't assume that you have to live where you have to live to save money. I pay more for my apartment so that I don't have to drive to work.
And the second question I wanted to ask is regarding, if I may, is regarding the employee benefits. So, would you typically should you typically like try to go for jobs where they offer more benefits, or typically more of the raw money? And what's the preference?
It depends on the situation. You just have to consider the total income. So I consider the base pay and the 401k contribution. Normally, I don't value benefits very much because my family is very healthy, and so we don't really need insurance. The 401k is helpful, but ultimately the contribution is not that high. So you just have to add it to the base pay, right?
Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
A couple questions too, I think. Probably a lot of us in here are a considerable ways into a mortgage. And like, for example, I've got a house with 5 years left on it and another with 10. And does it make sense when you're that far in to say, sell all that, move into an apartment? Or does it make more sense to finish it off and then have the depreciating asset, which holds up better than cash at least, but...
Yeah, I mean, you have to do the math. There's not a single answer, but don't get stuck in the sunk cost fallacy. Just because you've committed to this does not mean that you have to, keep this house.
Stick with it.
I mean, there's the closing costs. You'll have to pay $10,000, $20,000 to get rid of the house. So you have to factor that in.
Right.
But if it were me,
maybe rent them out instead.
Yeah, like my situation, I pay $1,500 per month for my apartment. House in the same area would cost $3,000 per month. I would end up saving money with that time period you gave me. So I would get rid of the house or rent out, right?
Yeah.
That's always a great option. Yeah.
All right. I think that'll do for now. Thanks.
Hi, thanks for your talk. So I'd like to start investing my savings potentially in the stock market.
Yeah.
And I know a little bit about it. I've done some preliminary research, but I guess not enough to quite feel confident to jump in. And I was wondering if you have any recommendations for someone in my position. Would you recommend jumping in and learning from experience and sort of trial and error, or are there maybe suggestions or suggested resources that you'd recommend before?
Yeah. So first thing is don't assume that you have to know a lot to start investing. You don't want to start aggressively picking stocks and trying to decide when is the right time to get in. The most important thing is how much you're able to save every month. So start early and save a lot. And if you want to make one choice, I think it's called VTI. It's the Vanguard All World Stock. So you invest in the whole stock market and you keep it forever. You can keep it your whole life and you're really not going to miss much versus anyone else. So there's a app called, you guys know, I recommended it, huh? You can use that, yeah. Robinhood, free trades, Acorns, yeah. You can save some set amount of money every month, and it's automatic. And if you want a recommendation for what to pick, don't pick individual stocks, pick an ETF, which is a large chunk of the market. Either the whole S&P or the whole US economy or the whole global economy. They'll do about the same. All the more sophisticated strategy is just they don't go for high return, just to lower the risk a little bit. And so that's why I showed you my chart where I have some US, some domestic. But if you just go for the whole market, you're getting 90% of the benefits of that.
Okay, thank you.
My biggest expense category by far is government taxes and fees. So any thoughts on that? And then related to that, where to live? So choosing states or countries based on taxes.
Right. Puerto Rico is the only place in the world where you don't have to pay the federal income tax. So when I lived in China, I paid taxes to the Chinese government and to the US government because US citizens face global taxation. Puerto Rico is about the only place in the world where you're exempt from federal income taxes, and so you only pay the state tax of Puerto Rico. So if you want a recommendation for where to live, that's the place to lower your taxes. Yeah, as far as where in the country to live, I don't know. I mean, my biggest suggestion is don't go by inertia. I see people that live in the city they grew up in just because they don't want to make the effort to move. And I mean, I aggressively move every few years to take advantage of opportunities. You know, if you don't have to work in a certain location for your job, move to a low cost of living. And I think of financial independence not as a certain amount of savings, but as the places where I can afford to live. So right now with $1 million, I can go live in Portugal and never have to work a day in my life. But when I have $2 million, I'll be able to live in almost every US city and never have to work again. And when I have 2.5 million, my goal, I can go live in Seattle, San Francisco, and never have to work again. Right? So if you have $500,000, you can go live in Belize, and that will sustain you forever. I think of savings not as how much I need to retire, but I have a map, and here are all the cities I can live in now and never have to work. And in 10 years, I'll be able to live in any city in the world and never have to work.
Thank you.
Something of the subtext in what you're saying is that you should really use your judgment to assess your own individual situation. I live in New York State, which has owner's regulations. And when I was younger, I rented because I expected to move around a lot. And as I got older and I realized I was more likely to stay in one place for a longer period of time, I looked at the math again, and I realized that the rate that the rent was going up by staying in one place was going to become greater over time than actually making a purchase. So I guess what I'd like, maybe you could elaborate a little bit more about making individual are general principles. They're not always going to be correct for every situation.
Right. Obviously, they're general principles, but I think for younger people, if you're not set on staying in a place for the rest of your life, it's almost always going to be better to rent. Because it's not all about money. It's about having the ability to focus on your career and your hobbies and your passions and family without having your home as a distraction. And realtors will not tell you the full cost of owning a home. I mean, I've worked with them. I have a friend who's one. They will not tell you how much it actually costs. Because the maintenance is often underestimated. The taxes are going up a lot in cities. And so homes are usually not, they cost a lot more than you would think, owning a home.
Right. Well, but as you reach an age where you're looking for a little bit more permanence, sometimes rent, like in New York City, for instance, the regulation says that the landlord is allowed to raise the rent by 4% per year or 8% for a 2-year lease. When that's $100, that's $4. When that's $2,000, that's a lot. That's $80.
Yeah.
So, if you're living in a place that doesn't have that kind of owner's regulation, then a landlord might say, maybe I'll raise it $25, $50. Once they're raising it $100 a year, it becomes more than what might go up for the assessment on taxes.
Yeah, but keep in mind that if you rent, you can move every year. I mean, I literally, for the last, as long as I've been an adult, I move every 1 to 2 years because I can pick an apartment in a cheaper area.
Right, so but you're saying if you intend to move for the rest of your life, but when you hit 40 or 50, you're not wanting to move every year. You're still building your income as you get older, and there's a cost. There's also a cost there. There's a cost of the movement. There's a
Well,
cost of the
I would say
effort.
for almost everybody that's aggressively building their income, it means changing jobs. And you want to have the whole nation, the whole world be your job market. And so for that reason, you're probably, if you care about growing your income, you're not going to stay in that job, you're going to sell your house. And then you'll pay closing costs and a lot of transaction fees. And the idea of selling your house is going to put a mental block in getting a new job. Right? If you have this mortgage, it creates all these liabilities and it creates all these expenses, and you're less likely to take on a risky new project at work. If you take two people, one of them rents and wants to consider wants to propose this new project, they may get her fired, may get her a promotion because it's very risky. I've done that. And one of them has a mortgage, the other one rents. If you have a mortgage and you have the prospect of being unemployed and having to pay the mortgage, even if you have savings, you're going to take less risks at work. Like, I have no problem hardballing with my boss and saying, I want this raise or I quit. Because I have very few fixed expenses. I can quit and it doesn't bother me that much. I have no problem saying, I want to go into this brand new role, as I did. I changed from technology to marketing. And maybe I'm going to fail and be fired and ruin my reputation. But I'm not going to worry about it financially at all, because I have no mortgage. I don't care about being on the streets is not a problem for me, or is not a worry for me. Mm-hmm. And so you take a lot more risks if you rent. Now, if you're really decided to be set for life, if you care about living in a country, having an estate, sure, buy a house. But if you want to be aggressive with your career and change jobs every few years, I think it's, from almost everybody, it's better to rent.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for taking my question. Obviously, I'm pretty young, and I'm sure you were expecting a question about Bitcoin sooner or later. So,
Cool.
So being young, I feel like there's like 3 different ways in which I can kind of go. I already invest in like a 401k to going through like the S&P 500. Do you want to go more for like traditional like FANG stocks, or do you think Bitcoin and maybe gold and the future is going to be a better shot?
Sure. I mean, I love Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. I think it might change the world. It might change the world. Don't notice the might. And I invested in it heavily towards my career, my skill set. Mm-hmm. I built several businesses around that. Small businesses, not successful yet, but maybe. But financially, it's extremely risky. Extremely risky. It's the riskiest thing you can buy short of the lottery. So I would suggest don't put more than a few % of your net worth into Bitcoin. And I say that as, the biggest fan, somebody actively involved in this industry.
Gotcha. So then more like gold, or do you want to go more into like FANG?
I want to invest in income-producing assets. Mm-hmm. Gold is speculation on the price. It doesn't generate income. If you invest, buy things such as homes and securities, stocks, mm-hmm. and bonds that are generating money for you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.